Welcome to On The Prowl, Q&A with Cats and Bolts Podcast, Episode 11. I'm your host, Bill, and we have Rod from Cats and Bolts Podcast. Rod, welcome. So happy to have you on the show today.
Great to be asked. How you doing, Bill?
We're doing fine. We're doing absolutely fine. We're just going to, and I want to start off by saying this, and want to just congratulate you and Serena for just one of the best hockey podcasts I've ever seen with Jeff. That was off the charts.
Thank you. Speaking of Jeff Rimmer, the original Panthers voice, yeah, he's a good guy, obviously. That was a lot of fun to do last week.
Yeah, and that story was, I even told this to my wife. My wife likes hockey, but she's not into the minutia like I am. I told her that, and she laughed, okay? She found that so humorous, okay?
Talking about the Mario Lemieux story?
Yeah, the Mario Lemieux story, yeah. That was just, wow. I mean, incredible. Well, I have a couple of real quick stories here, okay, from back in the day. Back in 1972, I went to my first hockey game. It was in Pittsburgh, and they played the Rangers, and Vic Hatfield was playing for the Rangers. This is how I date myself here. And I also attended the first time a team came back from a 3-0 deficit in the playoffs to beat another team. It was the Islanders and Penguins in 1975. And my dad and I went to all 4 home games. And you know how much tickets were? We were about 10 rows from the ice, $15 a piece.
I was going to say 10.
Yeah. It was just absolutely crazy. But thank you for stopping by today. And just we're just going to do some. We're going to start off with some quick Q&A, and then we're going to get into a little bit of the deeper stuff and look at the Cats and Bolts and how their seasons are going here. And I guess my first question is, Winter Classic or Stadium Series?
I'm a lifelong hockey fan, and I still don't really understand the difference between the two. What is the difference between the two?
Well, the only difference that I know of is the Winter Classic is on January 1st, and Stadium Series can be anytime.
Okay, well, and the other one is the Heritage Classics are the games in Canada. That much I know. Okay, so listen, I used to be an either or thinker. Now I'm like, give me it all thinker. But I guess, my dad worked for the Dallas Stars for 26 years. And when they had the Winter Classic in the Cotton Bowl, that was pretty special on New Year's Day a few years ago. So give me the New Year's Day. It leads well into the Rose Bowl and everything else.
Well, I went to the one in 2011 in Pittsburgh. I have a friend who knows the ticket manager at the Penguins, and we were able to get premiers. They were like premier seats for football, but they were horrible for the game. We were sitting like about maybe 30 rows back, but you couldn't see anything, and you had to look up at the scoreboard to look at the video because we couldn't see anything, and it was miserable. It was 40 degrees. It was raining. It was not conducive. It was not a good experience.
Well, that's the risk you run, brother. Like, I'll be honest with you. If you, I may, it's your show. I don't want to steal it, but there's talk here of playing one in Lone Depot Park. Maybe Panthers versus Lightning. Close the roof so we have ideal conditions. As you know, the Panthers are a pretty forward-thinking outfit, and they would like to get in on this outdoor game thing.
I was going to say that. That's one of my questions for you. You've already. Thank you for stealing my thunder, but no, that's good. I'm all in on that. I am all in on that. I think that would be fantastic. Here's another quick question for you: Lemieux or Gretzky?
Wayne.
Okay.
Sorry to give the one-word answer, but I was raised an Oilers fan, and here's the story. I was a Habs fan through the 70s, and my dad just he hated the Montreal Canadiens. He goes, I forbade you from cheering for Montreal, so pick another team. So it was about 1978, 79, I picked the Oilers. So I was an Oilers fan all through the 80s until August 9th, 1988. I think you know what happened that day, Bill. Mm-hmm. And I was teamless for a couple of years. That was when they traded Gretzky. I was heartbroken like every Oiler fan. And then my dad started working for Minnesota shortly after that, and I became a Stars fan for a very long time. But so I was now I admire Mario and what he's done, but Wayne's the one for me.
I got you. Okay, here's another one: Crosby or Ovechkin?
Also, Sidney Crosby for a few reasons, but I mean, he didn't single-handedly save a franchise, but pretty dang close with Evgeny Malkin. 3 Stanley Cups. He was the centerpiece of Canada's greatest ever World Junior team in 2005. But I have a lot of respect for Ovechkin, too. And, when this guy, by the time he's done, he will, I think, be the NHL's all-time greatest goal scorer. And he'd be the first non-Canadian to hold a major NHL award record, which is pretty cool, too.
Well, I got a quick Sidney Crosby story. When they were playing in the Olympics, I got to tell you this. My daughter loves hockey. Absolutely. More than my sons. Absolutely loves hockey. She was my hockey buddy. We would take a trip over from Columbus to Pittsburgh all the time to see the Penguins play. My mom had lived in Pittsburgh. So, she was 100% Sidney Crosby, all right? We're watching the Olympics, and Crosby scores the golden goal, okay? She literally picked up the DirecTV remote and was going to throw it through my 50-inch big screen TV. She was so mad. And mad at Crosby, okay? And she was his number one fan. I mean, it was hilarious. I told my wife this, and I still laugh about it. It's just so funny. It just was one of those things.
That's outstanding. I love those stories, but it's terrible when international play crosses or forces you to cheer against the people that you love, right? That was, and to be honest, I never even thought about that. I was watching that too. He beat Ryan Miller, as you know, in overtime. The Team USA goaltender in Vancouver. What a game that was. Holy smokes.
Yeah. That was that. You know what? You couldn't have asked for, and I kind of equate that game. One of my favorite games of all time was the very first Winter Classic up in Buffalo. That you couldn't have asked for the venue, the weather outside, Doc Emmerich on the call. It was just it had everything, and then Sidney Crosby scoring and to win.
There's not much more than can be said. I mean, it's one of my favorite discussions is who's on the Mount Rushmore of the NHL, and I don't know. You seem to be around my generation. Let's say, or Howe, Gretzky. And the fourth is a question mark. And I get a lot of blowback out of the Pittsburgh area. They're like, well, where's Mario? I'm like, well, Sidney's got more cups. Sidney's done way more internationally than Mario does. Now, this is an NHL Mount Rushmore, not hockey. There's a difference, as you know. But I think it's got to be Sid. I really love Sidney Crosby.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. That's just, for me, absolutely fantastic. Now, here's a real good one. Doug McClain or Paul Maurice?
Paul, because he won. End of story.
Well, I got a little backstory here. In '96, I took my oldest son to the playoffs in Pittsburgh, and guess who they play? We're playing the Panthers, and I'm like, I'm shaking my head after that Penguins lost, and I'm like, seriously, they're losing to a 3-year-old team. What's going on here? I just couldn't figure it out. It just absolutely couldn't figure it out. Here's another one for you. Tortorella or Cooper?
John Cooper. Oh, my God. But I mean, again, we measure cups. Rightly or wrongly, we do. John Cooper's got 2. Torts has 1. But I will say this, Bill, kudos on this show. The Florida hockey fans are going to love it. I'm going to pump the hell out of this. This is a great interview. But it's got to be John Cooper for a million reasons.
It's ironic. I found out one of the places that we frequent, we live in southern Hillsborough County near Sun City Center. Kind of like we're almost on the near Manatee County. We're just real close to it. But one of the places we like to go out to eat a lot, I found out from one of my friends last week. She was telling me, oh, yeah, John Cooper goes there all the time. And I'm looking at my wife. I'm like, really? Because, I love meeting people. Okay. And I would absolutely love to meet him because I think he's got a great hockey mind. And that's what I love about him. He's always forward thinking.
Well, yeah. And not only that, I mean, when you do polls like this, questions like this, we have our own reasons for our answers. And John Cooper and my brother graduated from the same class, Notre Dame College, Hounds of Notre Dame in Wilcox, Saskatchewan. So at that time, nobody knew John Cooper was going to go on to do the things that he did. I mean, he's from Prince George, BC. I believe he's a Wall Street trained money stockbroker. Right. And then goes on to win 2 Stanley Cups for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I'll be honest, to sit with him in a room when he's holding a news conference, and Paul Maurice isn't like, there would be a question, Paul Maurice or John Cooper?
Yeah.
We could debate that one for days. But I just sit there. It's like I want to flip open a notebook and just write down what they're saying. I'm looking around going, are you guys understanding what the pearls of wisdom coming here from John Cooper? Like to say he's a genius, I don't think would be an overstatement.
I agree with you 100%. Just his hockey mind is just incredible. And you know, the one thing I can say this, he's very measured and tempered in his responses, okay? But then you watch a press conference with Paul, you never know when four-letter words are going to start flying with Paul. I mean, it's just one of those things. Boom, and he just goes off.
Yeah, well, I love them both because they're dyed-in-the-wool hockey guys, and any NHL coach is, but Paul Maurice is from Sault Ste. Marie. I want to say Paul hides it a little better because I almost feel like Paul in a news conference is very reserved, very measured, very thoughtful. And on the bench is when he lets it loose, lets it fly. It's almost like, okay, which one is it? I respect the Jekyll and Hyde personality of Paul Maurice, not in a bad way, but John Cooper, I'll give you an example. Last year in the Stanley Cup playoffs, do you remember when John Cooper goes, we might as well wear skirts? Right in front of, and then the next day he's standing in front of the microphones apologizing and saying it was an embarrassment. He had to explain it to his daughter. What do you mean by that, Dad? You know, John is a little more emotional than Paul.
Yeah.
But both, I love them both, man. I love them.
I do too. And you know, you talk about a right fit for a right group of guys. You know, John has always been that way for Tampa. And Paul is just an absolute perfect fit with the Panthers.
Sure seems to be. And there's a lot of humility that goes with both. Like Paul has said all along that when he came to Florida, there was already a great culture. Like I've been here, this is my 4th season covering the Panthers. Joel Quenneville was the head coach, Bill, when I got here. And then Andrew Burnett, and then Paul Maurice. They had won a President's Trophy the year before Maurice got here. He goes, I just didn't screw it up. Now, having said that, Bill Zito obviously felt there was something missing with Andrew Burnett and why they made that change, even after they won a President's Trophy. I mean, that would be a very interesting trivia question. How many NHL coaches have won the President's Trophy for finishing first in the regular season and got fired?
Got fired, yeah.
Not too many.
Well, you know, I kind of equated it a little bit to football, and, you know, and there was a lot of talk with last weekend with the Steelers and Mike Tomlin starting Russell Wilson versus Justin Fields, who had the team at 4-2. And, you know, it's like you're changing horses midstream. Why? You know, that kind of talk. So my next question for you is this: Amarant or Amelie?
Ooh. Again, big difference. I mean, one's housed 3 Stanley Cup champions, one houses 1. Tampa is a hockey market. They've been selling out every game for a real long time. You know that. And we went over to games last year. I went with some Panthers fans and media, and we're driving around Tampa going, holy smokes, man, we got a long ways to go to be a hockey market like this. So Amelie is louder. It's housed more Stanley Cup champions. Don't tell Panthers fans of the Panthers. I got to go with Amelie. How about you?
I'm agreeing with you. But the one thing for me is I'm also looking at it as a fan experience. And I'll tell you this, getting in and out of Amarant is 100% easier than getting in and out of Amelie. Because I know my wife was very fortunate a few years ago. She was able to get some passes to like the Chase Lounge in Amelie, which was fantastic. And they included parking, and it was in the garage right next to the arena, which is fantastic. But the parking situation down there for Amelie, I think that kind of leaves a lot to be desired. At Amarant, it's like it's a no-brainer.
Sure. Well, let's consider this. Amelie's right plunk in the middle of downtown Tampa, and Amarant's out in Sunrise. So it's a bit of a drive for everybody to get to Sunrise. But you're right. To get out of there is a lot easier. But last time we were there was in the playoffs last year. And all that's popping into my mind is Hat Tricks Sports Bar. We stopped there after the game to get some wings. Woo! Lord have mercy. Hat Trick Sports Bar, I think, has every sports bar beat in the, if you want to do that. So, hey, they both have their pluses and negatives. How about that?
Yeah, I agree. Okay. We're going to get to some team questions now, and I'm going to start with the Bolts, okay? Kucherov, is he their best player?
Statistically, yeah, Victor Hedman's the captain and has been there longer. And I still think, Kucherov's a lot younger than Hedman. I guess if you put a gun to John Cooper's head and said, who would you rather keep? I think it would be Hedman for a variety of reasons. The leadership qualities, all that he's done. Yeah, Kucherov's got that 100-plus point season, and he's scoring like crazy. I think they could survive with Kucherov. Without Kucherov, I'm not sure they could survive without Victor Hedman.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you on that. Okay, they took a risk in a big one, and they signed Jake Gensel, and you know who they jettisoned, Mr. Stamkos. Okay, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't like it. I'm not a Lightning fan per se. There's a lot going on with the Lightning, that I don't think a lot of people are paying attention to. $2 billion worth of the franchise has just been sold by Jeff Vinik, right? They've got a new general manager in Julien Brisebois who's trying to do things his way. And I just don't like the way a franchise icon like Steven Stamkos got shown the door. Mm-hmm. That was just an ugly situation. And I think it's not something the Panthers would do. Like with Jonathan Huberdeau being traded, although it hurt Huberdeau, I don't know how else you do it. One minute he thinks they're going into contract talks. Next thing you know, he's traded to Calgary. But how else would you do that? And Jonathan Huberdeau doesn't mean the same to the Panthers of what Steven Stamkos meant to the Tampa Bay Lightning. It's still hard to say it in the past tense. I just didn't like the way Stamkos was treated. And I've got, I'm writing for the South Florida Tribune. I've put it in my column there. John Cooper at the end of the playoffs last year said Steven Stamkos belongs in Tampa.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember reading that.
And a couple months later, he's a Nashville Predator. Yeah. So there's a disconnect there. So I found it interesting, this with the sale of the Lightning, or a portion of it this week. They said nothing will change. The expectations are still to contend for Stanley Cup every year. And I was like, yeah, they probably will. But there's nothing saying that they're going to with Stamkos gone. Let's just say we're watching it very closely, Bill.
Well, one of the other things that I've noticed with the Bolts over the past couple of seasons, I remember the game where Bishop got hurt and Vasilevsky, it was his first time coming in the playoffs against the Penguins, and he shut them down the rest of that game. And then, he's been a pretty much a lights out kind of goaltender. But the past couple of seasons, he seems like, I don't know if the word is he's lost some focus or what, because he just doesn't seem as sharp. Like I watched the game against the Lightning against the Wild the other night. He just didn't seem as sharp and as crisp as the Andrew Vasilevsky a couple of years ago.
Well, let's not forget he missed the first 2 months of last season with the back injury.
That's true.
And I'm not sure if you ever fully come back from that. And I don't think it's just, I was a goalie, so I have a bit of a fascination with goalies. So I'm watching that pretty closely. But overall in the playoffs last year, you watched it, the Lightning were lifeless in that 5-game series, but for one game, game 4, which they won over in Tampa. I was there. It was crazy. But other than that, they didn't have a lot of life or spirit. And Stamkos was gone shortly thereafter. And Vasilevsky, I just don't think he's healthy. But you're right. Minnesota just toyed with them the other night. It's been quite an interesting odd season, which, by the way, Vasilevsky got pulled in Toronto. JoJo mopped up, and then JoJo played the next night in New Jersey, which the Bolts won 8-5. So something's going on.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100% with you. And then it came up on my news feed this morning that Tristan Jarry's been sent down to Wilkes-Barre Scranton for the Penguins, which that's a whole drama story in and of itself. I mean, I don't. And I'll tell you this, just to digress for just a quick second here, okay?
Yeah.
Somebody asked me, because, I do a hockey podcast, what did I think of the Penguins getting Dubas in as general manager? And here's my answer to them. He got Erik Karlsson in, and Erik Karlsson is way past his expiration date, the way he's been playing.
Picked up his $11.5 million salary, too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm not a Dubas fan. I don't understand the love for Kyle Dubas going way back to the Toronto days. I think he was 32 years old when they hired him. He was the wonder boy coming out of the Ontario Hockey League, where I think he'd won some championships there. Listen, Bill, again, I talk about you and I being of the same generation. There's something to be said about experience in life. At 32, there's no way you could have seen everything you're going to see in the game of hockey. And he was brought in to save the Penguins, and that ain't happening.
Yeah, I agree 100%. 100%. I have whole thoughts, and what I've done is, and I've told some of my friends who are Penguins fans, I'm going to say, look, and until 87 and 71 and 58 retire, okay, they're going to be where they're at. You're not going to see the changes that you're going to want to see with them until that happens. That's just the hard and fast truth. I mean,
well, hey, but look what the Lightning did with Stamkos. I mean, there is some longtime sports fans have said to me, quoted general managers that said it's better to get rid of an icon a year early than a year late.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I
agree with you 100%. With the Bolts, and this is the last Bolts question, what's their Achilles heel?
Too early to say, I think. Okay. Too early to say. Because they're a 500 team. You know, it stands right now, they're making the playoffs. I mean, again, we're 2 weeks into the regular season. So
right.
I think if anything, right now it's goaltending, but I feel dirty saying that after all Andrei Vasilevsky's done for the team.
I agree with you. Switching gears, we're going to talk some Panthers Q&A here. To me, one of the most underrated players in the NHL is Sasha Barkov, okay? Bar none. You know, I tell you what, Rod, because I begged my dad way back in the day to take me when the Penguins were playing Boston so I could see number 4, okay, which was just magical. I mean, that's the only word I had for watching Bobby Orr on the ice, was magical. Every year they would play the Bruins twice in Pittsburgh, and we would go to both games. And I would sit there mesmerized the whole time, all right? And I have that same kind of awe with Sasha Barkov, okay? The man, the way he passes, his forward thinking, and just the way his whole approach to the game, it's just incredible. But yet, and I kind of think I know what the answer is, but I want to hear what you think, why he's so underrated.
Because up until 3-4 years ago, Florida was a wasteland of a hockey market, and he just wasn't exposed. That's all. I mean, that's, you know, when I say I've been here 4 years, I was in Canada before that, so I can very confidently say nobody thought about the Panthers. Nobody looked at the Florida Panthers. He was buried in South Florida. They weren't making long playoff runs up until a couple of years ago. He just didn't have the exposure. You know, yet you get down here and you look at the record books and realize, oh, he's been here a decade. Oh, he was knocking on the door of a lot of franchise records, which he now holds. Games played, goals, assists, points, playoff points, you name it, everything. He owns it. Yeah. But he just didn't have the exposure. And that's not even really the Florida hockey fans' fault. They weren't on television. Like in Canada, yeah, I just flew home for an event in Canada last weekend. Flying back was the day the Lightning were at the Leafs. There were a ton of Lightning jerseys and hats and stuff in the airport because the Lightning have been on television, had these long playoff runs for a long time. Now it's Florida's turn. You know, that would be my answer. You?
Well, you know, and that's exactly what I was going to say is, and I think one of the reasons why, and this isn't a question, but this is a statement here, you know, why Zito, I think, has been able to retain a lot of these guys. The culture that Maurice fosters there is just, you want to play there. Obviously, the state income tax situation, which I get after moving to Florida 13 years ago. And the other thing is, which we just touched, it's a small market. It's not a New York. It's not a Los Angeles. It's not a Chicago. You don't have that intensity. And you have great reporters in there like George and Paul and, you know, and other ones. You know, and Alex, just, you know, not really grilling these guys, but asking some great Q&A with them, and they feel comfortable around them. So it's like, why not want to stay with Florida, you know?
Well, that's how I look at it, because they've been a winning team since I got here and a great culture. You saw the interview with Jeff Rimmer, you said, our podcast. He is like a lot of Panthers fans that are saying to me, you weren't here for the bad times. You're a front runner. You just got here. I'm like, that's not my fault. I get the real sense, Bill, that it was bad for a long time. A long time. I think they missed the playoffs for 12 years in a row. That's a lot. You know, that's what the Sabres are going through now. But again, all I do is I hear the stories.
Well, you know, and I'm going to agree with you 100% because I went through a lot of bad years with the Penguins. And I mean, okay, the big thing that I had to cheer for during the 70s was Sillaps, John Pronovo, and Lowell McDonald. Okay. And then I saw a defenseman, and Dave Burrows. Okay. That's how far back I go. And I'm of the age, I saw Jim Rutherford when he was goalie. Okay. And then I remember the very last goaltender who didn't wear a mask played for the Penguins, Andy Brown. Okay. I saw him play. This is how far back I go. And then, one of the highlights for me in going to the games, which we used to be able to get tickets. We would sit in what we call the nosebleeds for $5 going to Penguins games. All right. And then I remember one Saturday night, this was the first time I ever heard music. Like they play music all the time at games. It was Saturday Night All Right for Fighting by Elton John. All right. And this was a year they had Bob Battleship Kelly. All right.
Oof.
What and that was their claim to fame was, he was the lead player for them. They didn't advertise, that they should have advertised Sillaps and company, but no, it was Bob Battleship Kelly and coming in. Everybody came there Saturday night to see him get into a fight. And he did not disappoint with that. But no, to your point about a lot of bad years. Yeah, I experienced a lot of bad years with Penguins. I mean, a lot of bad years.
Well, yeah. It's with you saying that, the thing that flashed into my mind was the Igloo.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel bad for the young hockey fans now that all the arenas look the same. And when they were being built in the 90s, I remember saying that and talking with my NHL friends that Forum in Montreal, gone. Maple Leaf Gardens, gone. Chicago Stadium, gone. The Igloo, might not have been the best of those, but it was probably the most iconic in terms of how it looked. The Forum in LA.
Yeah. And I got to say this, after having gone, I went to the first game at PPG Arena with my daughter. Okay. And going to, you can't equate the two because it was so much louder inside the Igloo. I mean, the noise level inside there. Oh, I got a little Igloo story here for you.
Yeah.
Back in 2009, I had gone through a divorce. So I was single at the time, and it was very easy to get tickets to the playoff games that year. All right. And this was the year Disco Dan Bilsma came in and led them to the cup. Well, one of the games I was able to get tickets in the Igloo Club, and then they had a private area, which it had its own restroom, concession stands and everything. And I'm going to the restroom, and as I'm going there, I had a guy look next to me and said, "Hi, how are you?" Hi. And then I did a double take. It was Brian Trottier.
Wow. It's from Valparaiso, Saskatchewan. Yeah.
Just standing right there next to me. How you doing? I'm like, okay.
That would be him. That would be him. You're probably looking down at him. I don't know how tall you are, but he's not very big, is he?
No, he's not. I'm 5'10". So yeah, I was like, how are you? I'm like, wow. Okay.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Oh, and then before one of the Stanley Cup Finals games, I went to all but 2 playoff games that year. I went to the whole series and everything. I got to meet Evgeny Malkin's parents in the team store. The mother spoke English. The father didn't speak any English at all at the time, but they were incredibly nice, wonderful people.
Probably still don't. A couple years ago here, I was in the elevator with a woman and her small daughter. I want to say an infant, probably about 3, wearing Penguins jerseys. And I'm like, you don't even need to turn around. That is Evgeny Malkin's kid. Just looks exactly like him. So I hear they're fantastic people too. So
yeah, they're great. Well, he loves South Florida, and I think he has a home in the Miami area. He absolutely loves it down there. And I'd always thought just that they were going to pull a trigger sometime and trade him to the Panthers. I had always thought that. Okay, here's a question for you. Okay, to me, one of the icons I think for the Penguins, and seeing him play, was Jagr. Okay, there's just absolutely no doubt about that. And from a lot of the stories that I've read in Jagr's time with the Panthers, he really helped mentor Barkov. I mean, it said Barkov really kind of molded himself after Jagr. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I wasn't around then, to be honest. We'd have to ask Sasha about that. It's interesting with Jagr officially recently retiring, right? He just called it a career. Mm-hmm. I've watched him play so many times live, and he's an enigma as a player. You obviously watched him in Pittsburgh for a long time. Tell me if I'm wrong on this. You'd watch the game and sometimes wonder if he'd played and have to look at the score sheet and go, what? He's got 3 points. How the hell did that happen? because he isn't. Now, listen, he'll go in the corner and he'll come out with a puck. I'm not saying he's not strong. He's not skilled. He is. But I feel like he wasn't putting out 100% effort every night. Gretzky was similar. You know what I mean? They didn't drop a sweat, but recorded 3-4 points. Special players can do that.
That's a great point, Rod, because one of the things I saw Mario Lemieux's only game that he played in Columbus. All right. I had on the ice seats. Okay. And one of the things that I saw later in his career, what he did, and that's something I think he may have learned it from Gretzky, and I think Jagr has emulated it as well. They would park themselves on the boards near the blue line.
Yes.
And that way, it was so smart because, you get to a certain age, your legs aren't there, okay? And your energy level isn't there, but your hockey skills are still there. And in order to capitalize on that, you put yourself in a prime position. They always, and I saw that with Gretzky as well and Jagr, they put themselves in prime positions like that to where, they could get involved in the play.
Yeah, it was almost like they were hiding along the boards or up at the opposition blue line. And when they took the red line out, that even more played into their game, that they could receive passes up there. You know what I mean? So that's my take on Jagr. But again, I hadn't heard about his influence on Barkov. It wouldn't surprise me, but that's just my takeaway on Jagr. No matter where he was, I think it was 9 teams he played for. Mm-hmm. He was always just not given 100% necessarily. That's not to say he's lazy, because he was contributing, just wasn't as noticeable. Right. You know what I'm saying? I
agree with you 100%. Okay. Probably the greatest general manager I have ever seen is Bill Zito. I knew general managers back to Craig Patrick with the Penguins, and Rutherford with the Penguins, and Shiro with the Penguins. Nobody can hold a candle to Bill Zito. Why is that?
Because, and I've had the good fortune of being around him quite a bit. Did you see that poll in The Athletic that came out about a week ago of the top 10 front offices in the NHL? The Panthers rated 3rd, and there was a quote in there that I'll never forget. It was a quote of hockey executives were polled who were the top 10 front offices, and they said the Panthers are run like we would all run a team if we had a chance, meaning the hockey guys. Bill Zito runs it like a hockey guy, not like a business guy or a corporation. Paul Maurice has announced he's got an extension. A couple weeks ago, we're standing around after a game. I can't remember which one it was, home game. And we talked to Maurice, talked to a couple players, and the PR staff were like, "Don't go anywhere. We got a surprise for you." And I'm like, that was the night they raised the banner. So it was against Boston. All of a sudden, Bill Zito appears from behind a curtain with Carter Verhaeghe. Surprise! We've signed Carter Verhaeghe to an 8-year extension. And we're like, what? So the point is, I sat with Jeff Rimmer the other night and I said, are these not like off-season announcements and off-season things to do? And Jeff was like, yeah, you would think. But what it is, Bill, my point is, Zito doesn't want to let Paul Maurice get to the end of his contract. He doesn't want to let Carter Verhaeghe get to the end of his contract if he can. He wants these guys to be comfortable. He wants to reward them. He's running the team like an employee of a team because he's been in those shoes. Does that answer your question? He runs the team like the way we would all run a team if we had the opportunity, which tells me this team's going to be competitive and a contender for as long as Bill Zito's here.
A season is a marathon, not a sprint. And, and I think Paul said, I don't really start to consider looking at the standings and the schedules until after New Year's.
Yeah.
Okay? Do you agree with that?
I thought that a couple of years ago, like when because, I was a play-by-play broadcaster for a couple of decades. And when I got out of that and was kind of hanging out with the fans, I couldn't believe the way the fans looked at the game. I'm like, the teams are not looking at the standings right now. Trust me, they're not in October. They aren't. The fans and media are fixated with it. They're trying to fix their own game. They're not worried if they're slipping behind or if they're in a playoff spot or they're not. The coaches know. I'm sorry to cut you off, but the coaches know how good they should be. They know what they have. Right, that's where they're looking at it right now. So that's why I think Paul Maurice has been so successful, and I've long looked at it the same way. Sorry.
Well, no. That was perfect because I thought a great example. What I look at is individual games and how well they played. All right, because there can be a loss because I know one of the games they lost. I think it was in the finals. that, I remember the post-game press conference with Paul. He said he thought they played well. Okay. And that's the thing I look for in games. Okay. To see how well they played. Like, for example, the other night against the Rangers. And I told my wife, I said, you know what? I'm going to go on record right now. And it's so early in the season, but this is the way you should play hockey. All right. They were constantly on. They were up 2-0 before 3 minutes into the game. And they were constantly on pucks that night. Polar opposite from the game against the Wild, where it looked like they could really kind of like going through the motions kind of thing. It was just, and that's one of the things I think for me in the first few months until New Year's that I look at is how well they're playing in individual games. The win or lose, that's fine, but you don't want to get into too many losses in a row. But I think the big thing for me is to look at it and at individual games, see how well they're playing. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's where I think that they are. And that Minnesota game here was the night Maurice got his extension just prior to the game. And afterwards, he joked, he's like, I hope the ink's dry on that contract based on the way they played that night. And he just goes, we were nowhere near an NHL team tonight. And they weren't. But it's October. Right. Yeah. So it is a marathon. Listen, I've been around some very knowledgeable, experienced hockey people in my life. You can't pee away these games in October either, because points now count in April, the same amount. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? This could be the difference between a playoff spot or not. But if you're not playing at 10 out of 10 right now, it's not the end of the world. I do believe you want to be peaking going into the playoffs. You definitely don't want to be peaking in October. And that's why I'm getting such a kick out of the Winnipeg Jets at 7-0. Like, good for them. Good for them. But they always do this. They always like shot out of a cannon. And Calgary Flames off to their best start in 52 years. I spent 2 years in Calgary before I came to Florida. I get it. I get it. But now's not the time of year that they're handing out banners or trophies, Bill, as you know.
Yeah. And it's so right. Like it's a marathon and you got to just be in it for the long run and understand, you got to take it one game at a time, but you want to, and I think the first few months you want to form good habits and you want to get into some good rhythms. And, I accept a lot of losses as long as I think they've given a good effort. You can get a bad bounce, a deflection, lose a game in OT, that kind of thing. Those will happen all the time. Okay. But, those are always lessons learned from things like that. And you move forward from it. You don't spend time looking in the rearview mirror. All right. You go forward because those that look in the rearview mirror are like, okay. We're going to wrap things up here. But one of my other questions is this: Sergei Bobrovsky. Okay. See him play in Columbus. Told you I was a Blue Jacket season ticket holder for years. And I got to see him play here. And I'll tell you what. I cannot be more impressed with a player's maturity and poise than him. His work effort is off the charts, and just his humility is the same way. What are your thoughts on Sergei?
I love him. He is now my favorite goalie in the NHL. Until him, it was Flower. And how can you not love Marc-Andre Fleury? But now it's Bob. I mean, he's going to the Hall of Fame. He's got his Stanley Cup to go along with 2 Vezinas, and he's not slowing down. Like, I think he's 36 now. Just this week he recorded his 400th career win, fastest in NHL history to do it. Wow, first Russian to ever do it. And the saves. I mean, you've been following hockey for a long time. Remember the 90s when Hasek was doing cartwheels on the crease and stuff? We still remember those. Bob's doing them now. Now, his save on Dumba in the playoffs last year in Game 2 turned a series.
Oh, yeah.
You might have won a series for them. He is everything to the Florida Panthers. And what I love about the Panthers fans is now that I've been here long enough, I got some credibility to the degree that we would fight over Dale Talon because they don't like Dale here. They thought that he spent too much on Bob. Some draft picks didn't work out. Guess what? That happens with every team. But I said to Dale, before the Panthers won the cup last year, I said, would you do that deal again? And he goes, absolutely, I would do it again. You have to overpay on July 1st. He's who we wanted, and we gave him $10 million. And it's just nice, Bill, that he is finally, it took a while, but he rewarded the Panthers for the contract, which he was not, I understand, comfortable with at the start either. He struggled out of the gate. feeling like trying to earn that money because you know how much of it's up here, especially for a goaltender. And it's just nice to see that he's got it all straightened out, man. The fans love him, and there couldn't be a more worthwhile guy.
Well, I'm almost tempted because it's a 3.5. My wife and I got partial season tickets this year, and we're kind of molding it around weekends and taking a couple of days off here and there, which is going to be great. And I'm absolutely loving it. But one of the weekends I'm thinking about going down is I just saw that there's a sports signing over at Wellington, and they had to change that because they were having Panther Fest that day. So they had to change it, and it's Sergei Bobrovsky, and I'm thinking about coming down there just for that. I mean, he's somebody that I want to get my picture taken with, that I want to get an autograph from, that I want to talk to for a few seconds. I admire the guy so much. He really, I think single-handedly, he has turned this franchise around. He really has made such an incredible difference.
Yeah, and that's my point with Dale Talon. I mean, you get it. Just a lot of fans don't, but they're now, instead of fighting, they're listening. Dale Talon drafted Huberdeau, and while Hubie's not still here, that turned into the Tkachuk trade, who they love here now, right? He drafted Aaron Ekblad. The bones of this franchise were put in place by Dale, and Zito just enhanced it. And I don't think Dale would argue with that assessment, man. Dale had a big part of this, and signing Sergei was probably the biggest piece of it.
Oh, I agree. And, he put the pieces in place for Bill Zito to do his job. And I could just hear Bill Zito say something, he just handed me the keys to the car. And he really did. And I mean, and don't mess things up kind of a thing. And of course, Bill's done the exact opposite with that. So, I got to, again, you guys have the best hockey podcast, bar none. Okay.
Thank you, man.
You and Serena, you do such a good job on it. I watched the latest one. It was great. You guys just keep up, give my best to her, and tell her you guys just keep rocking, keep doing things. We're definitely going to touch base again later in the season.
Oh yeah.
And one of the things that I always tell, because I get asked, do I think they're going to repeat? Well, here's my answer to that. I think they're going to put themselves in a good position to repeat. Okay. Because I don't like to say, they're going to repeat something. Okay. But with the Panthers, I think a lot of the pieces are in place for them. They're putting themselves in a good position. And I think they'll be in a favorable position to have a chance.
Well, let me first say thanks for the compliments. We'll be here when you come down. We record on Wednesdays. We'd love to have you in our studio. I think it's November 10th, 11th, or 12th that Bob's doing that signing in Wellington. So be sure and look me up. And I think the one thing that should not be discounted that I don't hear talked about a lot, the Panthers had 0 injuries going into the playoffs and throughout the playoffs last year. The only serious one was Ryan Lomberg had the flu. He missed a lot of the playoffs because of that, but that's not really preventable, and they spent a lot of time on recovery, rest, and rehab here. That should not be discounted too. So as long as that continues to be the case, they have the talent. They now have the experience. So why would we not think there's a very good chance they'll be in a 3rd consecutive Stanley Cup final? And the last team to do it was, the Tampa Bay Lightning from 2020 to 2022. So it's not unheard of, especially in the state of Florida.
Well, one of my goals, Rod, is, and I'll kind of close with this. I had tickets to Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Finals, and I went in 2016 up in Pittsburgh, and the Penguins could have won the Cup that night, and instead Murray laid an egg, and they didn't. And you could have let the air out of PPG Paints Arena that night. I mean, it was just devastating. I mean, I don't think I've ever been more devastated from going to a hockey game. Both my wife and I, we were just flat out. Wow. It was just, but my goal is I want to be there. I couldn't get there for Game 7 last year, but I want to be there. I want to see my Panthers win the Cup in person. I want to be there for that. And I'm hopeful. I'm real hopeful that's going to happen in my lifetime.
Well, you might have to rob a bank to get tickets the way that it's going. But yeah, hopefully it's this spring.
Well, again, I can't thank you enough for being on today. You guys keep up your outstanding work. I talk about you guys all the time. I promote, I'm your number one fan. Okay.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate
you guys all the time because you do such a great job, and just keep up the good work. I'd love to get on a show with you guys. It would be fantastic. You guys have such great podcasts. like I said, bar none. I'm a fanboy. Okay, so but I want to thank Rod for being on today from Cats and Bolts podcast. And again, everyone, thank you guys as always. It's a great day for Florida Panthers hockey. Take care.